Hello and welcome, Stephen. How are you today?
I'm good, Dan. How are you? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Now, I always have a good look around people's backgrounds and the rooms that they're recording in. I can see some shirts. Any significance?
Yeah, the shirts. I'll give you the full. There you
Yeah.
go. There you go. The triptych. Um, Years ago, we
Yeah.
wanted to do something. We were a lot smaller then, but nevertheless, we wanted to do something that we could do everywhere in the world, and that everybody could do. And it would just allow us a chance to kind of get to know each other better.
Oh yeah.
We invented this event, which is now called Walk the World. And essentially what we do, to give you in short form, is we allow or encourage every team in every office everywhere in the world to find a walk that they can map and do. And they choose a day. We print T-shirts, Walk the World
Yeah.
T-shirts.
Yeah.
And if you raise sponsorship as a person for that walk, and also each team in each locality chooses a charity that they want to raise money for that's relevant to them and their area, and then we match whatever money they raise, and then everybody walks the world, and then we add it all up.
Oh, wow.
And actually, we have this year's Walk the World in London. So we probably do about 40, 50 of them around the world now every year. And this year we have Walk the World in London is happening, I think, not in 2 weeks' time. And I was just looking at it this morning. We've got 1,350 people registered so far, and for the London Walk. Last year, I think we had about 10,000 people walking. We've raised now into the millions of dollars for charity. It's great. It's turned out to be a really big thing.
Excellent. Thank you. No, it's always good to sort of understand the environment that people are living and working within. So we're going to get on to talk about, Stephen, I wouldn't say pouring through because it was only 4 pages, but had a good look through the trading update that was released yesterday for Jan to May. A couple of things I want to sort of pull out of that. The announcement was suggested that revenues were on track in 23 to exceed pre-COVID levels. And Informa Markets specifically, which is obviously home to hundreds of events around the world, posting particularly strong top-line revenues, I think increases of over 43%, 43.5% for the first 5 months of the year. So the question is, have you been surprised at the pace and scale of the post-COVID rebound in specifically the B2B events sector?
Surprised. Well, look, Dan, it's been a long road back. Funny enough, I've just come from a shareholder meeting with a shareholder whom I knew well. And she individually and the fund that she represents had left our register in March 2020. So she opened the meeting by saying, Stephen, there's a lot that's happened since we last met. I said, that would be the understatement of the decade.
Yeah, true.
So to say that I've been surprised, I mean, we've on the Walk the World theme, we've walked every step of the last 3.5 years. I mean, look, I'm biased. We're biased. We didn't know, but we sure as hell believed that the business that we'd built before COVID had a lot to offer customers and it would come back and that COVID would end. It was a question of when and how. And indeed, by and large, COVID has ended everywhere in the world. Now, I'm never casual about that because there will be individuals and communities and people who suffered and had in some cases had a tragic experience from COVID. But we were always confident that on the other side of COVID, the product that, a world-class trade show serving a customer, a community, an industry in the right way, with the right services around it, with the right experience, and with the right use of technology and data, that's a super valuable thing. And we're seeing that. And we're seeing that in every country, in every sector in which we operate. And you saw that in our numbers.
Sure, because I was going to ask a follow-up question, because I read that, you said that through COVID, you took a long-term view, protecting and preserving your B2B brands, investing in digital and data. You've part answered it, but, I was going to ask you, what did you know that perhaps people didn't? Or was it a gamble of some sorts? What gave you the confidence to keep investing in those areas?
I mean, gamble's a good word. I think in sort of, professional management speak, we call it a measured risk. But I mean, what's the difference?
Yeah.
I mean, look, we made probably 5 principal decisions during COVID, which really affected the way in which we navigated through that experience as Informa. Other people watching or listening to this will have had their own approach. We didn't furlough people. We didn't fire people. We didn't take government money. We raised equity and we refinanced our debt, and we took a long-term view that it might take as long as 2 years for it to come out the other side. But that when it came out the other side, we'd be in a strong position if we hadn't destroyed the company we'd built. That was our approach.
Sure.
Was it a gamble? Sure it was. It was a calculated set of judgments. So look, it's felt like a long time coming. I mean, I'm jolly glad I'm having this conversation with you in June 2023, not
Sure.
June 2022 or 21 or probably June 20. And along the way, we've had a couple of ins and outs because China opened and then China closed. And there have been other places where it's been a bit more unpredictable. We postponed and rescheduled and postponed and rescheduled. But net, we're in a good spot. It's been a real learning and living experience for those of us in this industry who've lived through it, and inside Informa. I think, as is often the case, let's be honest, when you find yourself in a little bit of adversity, shared adversity can create a great degree of, kind of human connectivity and shared passion for something if you come out the other side, and we definitely are.
Sure. Thank you. And outside of COVID, obviously, all businesses and individuals have had to contend with, I guess, the fallout from soaring inflation, high energy prices due to the war in Ukraine. That's led to obviously cost pressures on businesses, higher wages, supply chain challenges. What strategies have Informa, I guess, implemented to mitigate these and continue to sort of moving forwards?
Well, look, of all of those, I think all of the thing that most of us, as you say, is kind of real people rather than event professionals.
Yeah.
I certainly look at with most human concern is the conflict in Ukraine. I mean, I never thought I'd be seeing that level of military conflict in continental Europe in my lifetime. But you're right, there are a lot of external market circumstances, macro circumstances. I mean, we made a decision, the kind of a sub decision during COVID. We're a portfolio business, and we had a, relative to the group, we had a smallish portfolio of, what had become, beautifully formed data businesses, which traded under the divisional umbrella of Informa Intelligence. And we made a decision to sell those businesses during COVID. Which was slightly counterintuitive because they were sort of paying the bills at the time. But we did it because they were high performing, and we'd always been a relatively small player in that market. And that had the effect of generating significant inflows of cash and capital. So that's allowed us to take our debt way down. So we're not actually we weren't carrying any debt in net terms by the end of last year. We, as you know, have just spent a bit of money acquiring the Tarsus business, but even on that basis, we're sitting at maybe 1x earnings in terms of our debt levels, and we've got quite significant cash reserves on the balance sheet. So on the financial side, on the cost of money side, actually our company is quite well insured as a result of that. On energy, we long ago went to pretty close to 100% renewable energy, where we're an energy consumer. In any of our businesses. We've put a lot of work into sustainability as a business, in every sense of that word, to try and manage impacts and have a more environmentally sustainable approach to operating impact as a business. On costs, well, look, labor cost is our single biggest, talent cost is our single biggest cost, really. It's probably 35-40% of our cost base. But, we're, this as well as I do, Dan, this is a talent business. It's a people business. So you have to try and be on the right side of fairness. That's the way I always think about it. Are we on the right side of fairness with the majority of the people who work in the company? We won't get it right. I'm sure there'll be, and it might well be, an Informa colleague watching this saying, well, that's not my experience, but I would sincerely hope that would be a very small minority. And we manage our costs in other areas in order that if we do have discretionary money, we can put it towards talent rather than anything else.
Sure. Thank you.
Talent and technology, I would say.
Well, coming on to technology, you previously spoken about the reinvention of the business through tech and data. And I'm sure we could spend hours talking about technology and data, but sort of in a nutshell, what did you mean by that in terms of reinventing the business through tech and data?
Well, sort of two sides of the same coin.
Sure.
Let's take the easier one, or maybe the more obvious one, which is there's no product invented, you know this, today, or very few, where if you're not applying digital capability, digital technology to enhance the service experience, you're probably not making that product as good as it can be.
Sure.
So in the event business, simpler, easier, more intuitive registration systems, better space planning capability, better product discovery, better, attendee management, better matching and meeting management capability, data in advance of the event to enhance the experience for the customers, information and data after the event to enhance the experience of the customers. All of that is the application of digital service technology to the event experience. It doesn't change the core fundamental, which is you and I get to meet each other. You and I get to see each other. I get to see your product.
Sure.
You get to look at the white of my eyes and see if I'm a serious buyer. But it improves the overall experience. Data is you've got to know more about your customers, and in particular about your buyers. And you need to know not just that you're called Dan Assor and that you're a professional journalist, or you've become a professional journalist.
Don't say that.
I meant that as a compliment. But you want to know, what are Dan's interests? What are Dan's passions? Is he, what level of preference does he has? How much of a serious
Sure.
buyer is he? Where is he looking? What sources of information is he after? And that kind of combination of profile data and behavioral data makes you much more knowledgeable about what's going on in the markets you're serving, and much more knowledgeable about the customer. And if you can get that combination of a better product experience because of digital technology and rich data, which allows me to really understand Dan, the customer, it's a better business.
Sure, makes sense. Thank you. I want to move on to talk about acquisitions. Obviously, lots of people that are watching this would have seen my interview with Doug Emsley, former CEO of Tarsus and now a senior advisor at Informa. For those that aren't aware, obviously the deal was announced for, I think, $940 million, the acquisition in March, and I know that that's now been completed. At the time, you said you've long admired the Tarsus business, and you think it will be a fantastic combination with your existing business in the B2B markets. Why was Tarsus such an attractive proposition?
Look, it's a great business. It had good brands. It had learned to operate in geographies around the world, which is hard to do. It had built a reputation with the kind of counterparties in the business that was extremely strong, with venues and trade associations and joint venture partners. We had some ex-Tarsus colleagues inside Informa, and they'd always been impressive professionals in the field. I'd had the privilege to get to know Doug a bit and Neville a bit over the years. And look, bear in mind, Dan, and I've said this to Tarsus colleagues, those that I've had the chance to meet since they became part of the Informa Group or are becoming part of the Informa Group.
Sure.
9 years ago, our exhibitions business was smaller than Tarsus.
Yeah.
So it's not like we've been hanging around this hoop for 50 years. And so when I started doing this job, and we made a decision that we could possibly build, the world's biggest and best business in this field. Tarsus was one of those businesses that you went to learn from. How did they do it?
Sure.
What had they done? How had they gone about doing it? So there was, and then if I looked at the business that we'd built and bought over the years, it was quite geographically complementary. I also always thought from the outside, and now I definitely feel from the inside, that culturally it was quite complementary. I mean, we're a bit bigger than Tarsus, but actually the tone of the companies is very similar.
Sure. The deal was completed in just, I think, 4 weeks. Was that right? Relatively quick time frame.
About that, yeah.
And I'm just interested to know, is that typical? Because for that size of deal, I'm just interested to know, what the rush was to get it over the line.
I don't know what typical is. I mean, it was an off-market deal. It was a private conversation between us and Charterhouse and the leadership of Tarsus. We knew each other a bit. It wasn't our first rodeo. We'd done a few of these. We'd actually had a prior conversation with Tarsus actually in another cycle, so we knew the business a bit.
Sure.
And I think if you concentrate the mind and the resources, you can get a lot done in 4 weeks.
Yeah. Fair enough. I was having a chat with my friend Steve Monington over at Mayfield Merger Strategies, and one of the things he actually wanted me to ask you, so this is a question from him. Obviously, Tarsus was going along nicely, and obviously they had their own plans for the business and for acquisitions. When you acquire a business like Tarsus, what view do you take of their own pipeline of potential acquisitions?
They definitely were. They definitely did, and we were definitely interested in receiving that list.
Yeah,
and
Okay.
and watch this space.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Obviously, recently as well, Informa announced, I think it was in May, the acquisition of Winsight, who serve the restaurant, non-commercial food service, convenience retailing, and grocery industries. How important are vertical plays now to the business, and to what extent is that's I guess a signal of an intention to horizontalize the business?
Cool, blimey! I've never heard anyone use horizontal as a verb. Horizontalize. I'd steal that. I may even have it somewhere. Have I got an annual report? I do. I've got an annual report.
He's off.
If you look at our annual report, I said this yesterday at our AGM, which I'm sure none of your viewers were watching. Our mission statement as a company, and people kind of poo-poo mission statements, but if you get them right, they have some value. Ours is champion the specialist.
Okay.
That's what we say. That's our job.
Yeah.
That's what we do. In everything we do in Informa, in all of our businesses, we champion the specialist. And I think that's a pretty good summary of the importance of horizontalization, as we now call it professionally.
Yeah. We've just created it.
Because essentially you need to be, the more deeply steeped you can be in the industry you serve, the better you're going to be able to provide any product or service, and the more credible you're going to be as an enabler and a facilitator and a provider for your customers.
Sure.
And in our business, I'm sure this is true in many other businesses, we have really outstanding subject matter experts. Outstanding subject matter experts in verticals. And actually, for many of those people, if they've spent 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 years in beauty or industrials or healthcare or biotechnology or aviation, they're not then going to suddenly wake up one morning and say, do you know what? I really think I'd be interested in moving from aviation to natural food products. They're really knowledgeable about an industry. The same, I think, applies more broadly, which is you can surround a customer with other services. And so to your point about either horizontalization or verticalization, the deeper you can be in an industry, I think, as long as you're not in such random adjacencies that you're spread too thin,
Sure.
it enhances your market knowledge and the quality of each of your individual products. Winsight was a great example of that. They had built a portfolio. They've got an outstanding market-leading trade show, which is the marquee brand in that market. They've got an outstanding specialist research and project consulting business with a long-standing reputation, Technomics, very like our Omdia business in our technology portfolio, or Kappa in our aviation portfolio. And they have a series of digital media assets. And that allows you to really be able to play notes for your customers about how they want to bring a product to market, or meet a buyer, or build profile, or get smarter, or get more knowledgeable. Do I think we would ever end up as a company completely verticalized, to use another word? I doubt it, because it doesn't work everywhere. Geographically, it doesn't work everywhere by end market. But as a direction of travel, are we doing more of that? Yes, we are.
I want to talk about the fact that Informa, you've got many sort of highly successful pure play exhibitions and conference businesses, but also, I guess, over the last decade more so, you've invested a lot in hybrid marketing services, one-to-one partnerships, I think, for example, in life sciences. So those, I guess, are put into, I guess, the phrase of event plus models. Is that going to be the future for Informa, or do you still see a role for pure play events?
Yes is the short answer to both questions. I think that is the model. I think you've got to constantly innovate. I think a lot of the things you refer to in the Events Plus model are examples of enhancing the customer experience by the application of digital service technology. Matchmaking is a good case in point. But equally, you can do an absolutely outstanding pure play, what you and I might describe as a traditional event product, and in the right market at the right time, in the right geography with the right end customers, on its day, nothing beats that.
Sure.
And I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. And also, I've never subscribed to the view that industrializing to a format is the way this business operates at its best. But that doesn't mean that you can't seek to apply some degree of standardization, some degree of platform technology, some degree of data capture, some degree of kind of systems efficiency. If it's a total free-for-all, you're probably not getting the benefits of scale. If you try to make it, here's my format, fill in the blanks, then you lose the benefits of personalization and multi-local and close to your customer. This is dead easy to say on a camera or in a chat with you. As you and I know, it's thousands of colleagues in Informa know. It's a lot harder to get it right on the ground, in a team, with a brand, and in a company. And I'll be honest, we don't get it right all of the time. And sometimes people will say, this is too loosey-goosey for me. And other times people will say, this is a straitjacket, I can't work, I don't have enough freedom. So you're always slightly toggling between those two. But I don't think you can only be one. I don't think you can just be everybody does it the way they want to do it.
Sure. Have to have some standardization. Thank you. I just want to get a flavour of what's the ongoing impact of Brexit in terms of altering the strategy or your view that the company has on the UK market.
To be honest, I mean, I've got my own personal views on Brexit, which are, of no interest to anyone other than me. But we are almost completely Brexit neutral business operationally. I mean, we're listed in the United Kingdom. And so if Brexit has had an impact on capital flows in and out of the market, then that's had an effect on us because we're listed here in the United Kingdom.
Sure.
If it's had an effect on the value of the currency, it's had an effect on us. But actually, we are a very, very, very small operator in the United Kingdom market.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of our business and our revenues gets conducted in North America, in China, in the Middle East, in South America, in continental Europe. We do some things in the United Kingdom. In fact, ironically, I'm chatting to you this week, Dan, where London Tech Week, which is one of ours, has actually been on and has been super successful. But that's really the exception, not the rule. So we're unusual in that sense, in that Brexit's a big event that's had a big impact on the country in which we're headquartered and domiciled, but it hasn't really had an effect on our business.
Sure, thank you. And a good segue into London Tech Week and about the UK. There's been a lot of conversation about AI recently, both in all sectors, including the event industry and how it's going to affect people. And UK, obviously, our UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said he wants the UK to be a key player in global AI regulation. And I think the UK are going to host the first global summit on that. Can you just talk about how Informa are sort of tackling the AI question and what it sort of means to the business, do you think, moving forwards?
Well, look, we were delighted to have London Tech Week as the backdrop for many of these discussions here. That's been an outstanding success for us. We bought into that business a good few years back. We then partnered with Founders Forum. We then became a minority shareholder in Founders Forum, and we've turned London Tech Week into an international calendar event. It's a pure play example of how do you build a franchise pretty much from scratch. As part of that, we had another product, AI Summit, which again we started a few years back. That's now become a really big brand in our technology portfolio. AI, we've got heaps of AI deployment inside Informa, everywhere, from the back office to the mid office to the front office, in marketing, in invoicing, in customer access, in content verification, in authentication. I mean, is there going to be more of it? Yes. Is it on balance an opportunity to do more things that you can automate? Yes. To free up more time, to add more values to things that you can't automate? Yes. Is that bad news for anyone inside the company? I mean, conceivably, there might be some specific roles which over time you don't need as many of. But I mean, we're a growth business, Dan. I mean, last year we hired 1,500 colleagues. This year we're probably hiring 100, 150 new roles a month. I don't personally see it as it's a new technology or it's a development of an existing technology. And probably the only difference between other transformative technologies that I've seen is I suspect this one might move at a faster pace because it needs an enormous amount more computing power, but it doesn't need an enormous amount of capital. It's not an infrastructure, it's a software capability largely, or a set of software capabilities. So I think it will help us in the speed and accuracy and possibly creativity and relevance of customized content. And it will reduce some of the more tedious jobs that can be automated and free up more time to make our products that our customers value more customized, more creative, more compelling. I also have a personal view, and here I'm editorializing, but we touched on this a bit yesterday at our results release. The more and more these things happen, I think there's a disproportionate increase in the value of human meeting. So the rise of, to put it in really colloquial terms, the rise of the robot actually has the perverse consequence of enhancing the value of human engagement. And at the core of the B2B product that we offer and other people offer, a trade show, an exhibition, a conference, a Confex, it's a human interaction which sits on top of a lot of digital technology, but the value of that human interaction gets more and more important.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So hopefully we're not going to be replaced by robots just yet, or in the near
I hope
future.
not. No.
In the near future. Just in summary, what do you see are the key challenges for the events industry over the next maybe 12 to 36 months?
Look, I think the next 12 to 36 months could be and should be, I mean, let's put possible macro activities to one side.
Sure.
If we as an industry continue to do what we could do, I think this could be a really, really powerful 3 years. The world is reopening. There are supply chains that need to be refilled. There's new products that need to come to market. As you say, there's a technology innovation coming in software, which I think is going to create some exciting opportunities. Markets are moving into more and more specialist areas. There are huge swathes of the world that are expanding economically and socially in Asia, in China, in Africa, in South America, in Eastern Europe. And I think there's a real opportunity for the best of what we do as an industry to be really valuable as part of that. It looks at the moment like there may be some parts of the world that have a sort of muted level of GDP growth, but it seems as though we might be able to avoid a structural long-term recession. If military conflict doesn't expand beyond the current terms, and God willing,
Sure.
there is some breakout of peace, I hope I'm sort of thoughtfully optimistic about the next 12 to 36 months.
Thank you. Just want to ask you, during the pandemic, I guess the relationship between the events industry and government probably wasn't as strong as it could have been. And maybe the government, the policies were reflected in that, and specifically in the trade show and exhibition sectors. They maybe didn't understand that events were such a broad church. Obviously, you've served within government. How do you think industries in general can influence the government more?
I think it helps immeasurably if you're dealing with a government or a government structure rather than a government structure, where strategically what the trade show and exhibition, or what in the jargon is often called the MICE industry, meetings, information, communications, entertainment and events, is central to the strategy of the government entity. And I think where you tend to see that most is in cities, city-states, smaller countries, and countries where manufacturing is central to what they do. It's no coincidence that the biggest trade show markets in the world are China, Germany, North America, and parts of the Middle East. And that's largely because either the location has decided, I'm going to use trade shows and my geographical location to bring thousands of people here as a neutral meeting place. Dubai, as an example, Singapore as an example, Hong Kong as an example, or the big manufacturing economies, North America, China, Germany, or sub-states, the state of Florida, the state of Colorado, the state of California, the Greater Bay Area, the city of Shanghai, have decided this is central to our strategy in running this location, running this area. Here in London, part of the reason why London Tech Week has been successful this year and over the last few years is we've worked hand in glove with the mayor's office and the government to bring the technology industry to London in a coordinated fashion. I think that really is the key ingredient. If there isn't that strategic recognition, operational recognition, that business tourism, capacity, infrastructure, access, government endorsement, if you're trying to persuade people of that value, then you're probably on the back foot and it's not going to work. And then you get into some basic things like, does the location have capacity?
Yeah.
As you and I both know, look, AdNet do a fantastic job with Excel, and Excel is a great location. NEC is a great location. Olympia, I'm sure, when it comes back on stream, will be a great location. And there are some other spot locations in the United Kingdom, like Tobacco Dock and Glasgow, which are great locations. But at scale, if you want a scale trade show event, look at Shenzhen, look at Dubai, look at Vegas, look at many other places in the world, and that's where you see a lot of trade show volume, because venue capacity is a kind of prerequisite. So there are a lot of moving parts on that, but at its heart, I think it helps if the location or the government or the city or the state sees the MICE industry as central to their own strategy, because then you're pushing on an open door.
Makes sense. Then they're both aligned. Understand. Thank you. Just want to quickly move on to one of the other central issues that are dominating specifically the trade show and exhibition space of sustainability. And you touched upon it before. I mean, obviously, Informa organises hundreds of trade shows each year. This huge environmental impact, from greenhouse gas emissions, venue energy, venue waste, material waste, booth construction, so on. What do we think that the industry could be doing more of in this area, and what strategies and measures have Informa got in place to offset this impact?
Look, I mean, one of the advantages that we've had at Informa is that certainly at the scale we're now operating in that market, we've really built this business over the last 10 years. And so we had the opportunity really to build in sustainability pretty much from the ground up. We hired somebody about 7, 8, 9 years ago who was a partner in a consulting firm, who was an expert in this area. We bolstered him with external resource and internal resource, and then we invented our own program, which we called Faster Forward, Faster to Zero. So we've been at this now for 6, 7, 8 years, and we've invested time and money and resource and capability. We started out by trying to create a framework. We chose the DJSI, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, as the framework that we would use. We entered the DJSI index, I think, for the first time in 2018. We then started setting science-based target levels, which we would seek to follow. We launched a whole program around energy consumption, around carbon neutral accreditation, around better stands, around what we called the fundamentals program. We achieved a CDP rating. We paid to offset 100% of all of our colleagues' travel. In 2021, we then ended up as the #1 ranked business in our sector globally in what we were doing here. We've piloted carbon offset programs for attendees. I mean, we've taken this very, very seriously now for quite a few years. There's work still to do. In the United Kingdom, there's now a whole set of accounting obligations on public companies that's around disclosures, carbon impacts. So I think this train has definitely left the station in a good way. It's 100% central to what we do and how we think about a sustainable business, sustainable growth, sustainable profit, sustainable investment, sustainable technology, and sustainable. So I just think it's become if you excuse the pun, it's become a hygiene factor. If you want to be a successful business, particularly in the public markets, if you haven't built this into the architecture of your business, if you're kind of sticking it on, you're going to struggle.
Sure. Thank you. It's been pretty much 10 years, Stephen. I think it was 10th of July, the announcement was made that you were going to take on the role as Group CEO. I read a stat, the average tenure of the FTSE 100 CEOs is 5.4 years. Why do you think you've bucked that trend?
Who knows, Dan? You tell me. I mean, I'm not counting. I hope no one else is apart from you. It's been a game of 3 halves, to use a footballing use a footballing metaphor. I mean, I first of all had to learn my way into the job. We then We then set about growing the business we've got and repairing our intelligence and data businesses. We then hit COVID. That was a survival chapter. In that survival chapter, we decided to double down on our two big engines, B2B markets and academic markets. Now we've come out the other side and we're in the third chapter. And I think we're going to have a fantastic next 3 to 5 years. I'm enjoying it. I hope I'm still doing a good job. Every chief executive says this. Informa is, in its own little way, quite a unique place. I give my predecessor, Peter Rigby, due and a lot of credit for that. There was always a kind of specialness to the culture of Informa. I had the privilege of being a non-executive director for a few years before I became chief executive. So I've been around the company for a while,
Sure.
Actually a bit longer than the 10 years that you describe, and it's become a significant part, and at times it feels like the entire part of my life, and I think we've got much more we can do. So let's hope that no one else is counting.
I didn't say I was counting. I was just merely stating a fact. Do you think your leadership style, or adding up? Do you think your leadership style has evolved, not only over that time but over the duration of your career? Just sort of keen to understand how people in positions for a significant period of time, should I say, sort of have to evolve and adapt.
I think so. I mean, look, leadership is a bit like anything, isn't it? It's like, have you ever read that book? I think it was called Open, which was I think it was either a biography or an autobiography. I think it was an autobiography of Andre Agassi. And he talked about his whole life experience and how he ended up as the outstanding tennis player he was. And I think in there he came up with the 10,000 hour principles, which is,
sure,
if you want to be really, really good at something, you got to put a lot of time into it.
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form, and I don't mean this hopefully in a boastful way. I'm just a bit like you. I'm just adding it up. I've been leading companies or organizations for the best part of 30 years. I mean, if my leadership style hasn't evolved, well, God help the poor people who are having to live with it. And I would hope, as well as evolving, it's got a bit better. We had a board meeting yesterday, and I said to my board that I think we had a big discussion about AI, to go back to your earlier comment. And I said, look, there's the dynamism in technology is very evident. The dynamism in the external markets is very evident. But one of the things that I think is really changing, and I observe this as a leader of a company, is what I would call the dynamism in culture, in the culture of a company. Businesses and culture, it's so different now than it was when I first ran a business in my early 30s, and generally for the better. It's much more diversity, there's much more authenticity, there's much less formality, stuffy, I think unhelpful formality. It's much more fluid. You have to be much more flexible as an employer. And if leadership is your craft or your job, and it's both my job and my craft, if you can't adapt to that level of cultural dynamism, well, I think you'll struggle. And so I think you have to evolve over time. And I enjoy that learning process. As a leader, I find myself trying to think more about leadership now than I did when I first started doing it.
Sure. So, in summary, what would you say would be the key traits that a modern leader needs to have? All things being equal, obviously, all businesses, different shapes and sizes, I get, but
I mean, you've got to want to do it. I mean, that's true of any job.
Sure.
I always say, if you're recruiting someone for a job, if you've got two candidates and they're sort of about the same ability, or one of them's marginally better than the other, technically or on competence, who's the one who really wants it most? You've really got to want it. and particularly big leadership roles, they demand a lot of your emotional energy. So you've got to really want to do it. I think you have to be curious. I definitely think, to your question, Dan, you have to have flexibility and agility in the way in which you adapt your leadership style, particularly if, like us, we probably operate at reasonable scale in 20 or 30 very different cultures. You can't arrive with a kind of, well, here's the way we do it. I don't think. But I also do subscribe to the view that ultimately, and maybe we've seen a bit of this in the United Kingdom, serious leadership responsibility rarely develops character, but it invariably reveals it. And I think there are some characteristics and character traits that if you're going to step into a big leadership role, look in the mirror, because whatever those character traits are will be visible to many, many people, not just to yourself.
You once said that life can only be generally understood backwards, but you have to live life looking forwards.
Yep.
What did you mean by that?
I'm a great believer in what I call the in a galaxy far, far away school of thinking. I think if you're dealing with an issue, it's generally unhelpful to have no sense of context. How have we ended up here? Now, you don't want to be the boring corporate historian or the kind of the nerdy dullard in the corner, but I think it's really helpful to have some sense of context. And I think it's helped me do this job, that I was on the board for 3 or 4 years as a non-executive. I had a sense of where the Informa company came from. But that's never going to get you to where you want to be. You've got to look forward. If really your view of what to do next is determined by the past, you probably won't get there. But if it's completely uninformed about the past, I think you can make some quite significant step mistakes or cultural errors. And now there will be moments in time where those things are not true. Sometimes it is helpful just to have somebody who's completely unencumbered by history. And that's normally when you've got a business which has, for some reason, just gone completely off the rails. That was not our case. But our challenge at Informa was it was a very strong culture. It was quite a distinctive place. But how could we be a bigger and better version of what we were? How could we have more ambition, more reach? How could we shape an industry? And that required us to look forward, to look at technology, to look at the United States, to look at China, to look at what did market leadership mean and how could we get there. That was a forward-looking need. But I think you have to have both.
Thank you. Who's been your biggest personal influence, would you say, over your career?
I am going to say something that's going to sound like a terrible cliche, Dan, but I hope you'll forgive me in the comfort and confidence of your virtual studio if I say if it happens to be true. Number one on that list would be my wife, without a shadow of a doubt. And then number two on that list, on the kind of curiosity principle, would be, for whatever reasons, and maybe this speaks to my own personal history, I've always been open to being mentored. I've sought mentors, and I have had the good fortune, both in my line bosses and indeed in more senior people who have reached out and mentored me, or guided me or given me advice. But I think it's also been because I've been open to it and I've wanted it. And there are a number of people, I will not name check them all, but there have been a goodly number of people who have been generous in their counsel and in their advice. And I think if you can find somebody who you can trust entirely, doesn't have to be your wife or husband or partner, or could be a friend, and if you can be open to multiple influences, then you have a place of emotional and practical security, and then a significant kind of brains and experience trust to draw upon, I think that gives you ballast and context. And I've been fortunate to have both of those things.
Thank you. And have you got a proudest achievement? Obviously, you've led many businesses, been involved in many companies, government. Is there one single moment or position that you've taken up that you sat back and thought, well, this is something I'm immensely proud of?
There have been a few. I've been lucky. There have been a good few.
Sure. Yeah.
To take a topical one, I tell you, I said this to my wife late last night when I eventually got home. I felt yesterday we had our AGM in June 2023. I felt super proud of the Informa company. I mean, we nearly hit the rails during COVID.
Sure.
We lost half of our revenues in the space of 2 months. And the team here, the company, the culture, our shareholders, our board, we, like many people in the events and exhibitions industry, we spent many a day, many a week, many a month answering don't you think events are dead? No one's ever going to meet again. Can't we just do this all on Teams or Zoom or Hopin? And, and it's been a long road back. And we held our nerve. We held the company. We did it in a very collective way. And we have come out the other side as a better company, I think a better culture, to your point, with an outstanding array of brands and a market position. And we can see a path to further growth and strength with some degree of confidence, Dan, for the next 2 to 3 years. And I have to be honest, I feel really proud of that.
Thank you. Stephen, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your candor, the informative answers to your questions. Could have gone on for a long period of time. I was also going to ask you whether you felt that whether you felt disappointment that Nadine Dorris wouldn't be joining you in the House of Lords, but perhaps that'd be unfair.
I think that was by other people. Listen, Dan, I've enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you genuinely have too. And I hope if anyone chooses to watch it, they get something out of it that's useful. But thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you.